Welcome to Redacted Realms, where the shadows of history whisper their darkest truths. You were never meant to hear this. That's not drama. That's not clickbait. That's truth, raw and unfiltered. Because what you're about to learn was buried in stone and sealed with blood long before your grandfather ever learned to lie. Politely, it begins with a woman vanishing into thin air. Yes, but that's only the bait. This story isn't about a disappearance. It's about a reality scrubbed so clean you never even knew it existed. You've seen the smoke, this is the fire. You've felt the chill, this is the abyss. This is not a story. This is a descent. And once you start falling, there is no way back. December 1887. The richest man in Pittsburgh wakes up to find his wife's gown still warm on the marble floor. But she's gone. Locked doors, sealed windows. No footprints, no witnesses. The servants saw her go to bed. The perfume still lingers. The emerald gown lies with mathematical precision, like a ritual had just been completed. The silence inside that mansion was not peace. It was aftermath. This is the case of Evangeline Vandemark, the cultured, intelligent, radiant wife of steel magnate Cornelius Vandemark. But her story, much like yours, doesn't begin with love, it begins with leverage. Because in 19th century Pittsburgh, marriages among the elite weren't unions. They were mergers. Evangeline wasn't a bride. She was an asset. A final signature on a contract between two empires, hers, old Boston banking blood, and his, forged in furnaces, blood and sabotage. You see, Cornelius didn't become the king of steel by lifting others up. He rose because others were buried beneath him. Laborers, inventors, rivals, visionaries. Each of them disappeared, choked in smog or lost to suspicious accidents. One by one, quietly, efficiently, and Evangeline sharp, moral, dangerous, began to notice. Now ask yourself, what happens when the only person who knows your secrets sleeps next to you? She kept records. She investigated. She wore that emerald gown not for beauty, but for armor. You see, symbols matter. That locket she wore missing after her vanishing wasn't just jewelry. It was a keystone, a cipher, a code meant to outlive her. Meant for someone like you to find, someone who would understand its message not with the eyes, but with the soul. Because here's the truth no one dares to say aloud. Evangeline was not kidnapped. She was not murdered. She was erased. Like a typo in the manuscript of history. And when you look closely, you begin to realize she was never the only one. Cornelius Vandemark was part of something far older, far more insidious than the Steel Baron Wars. Something the newspapers never printed. A cabal of industrialists, bankers, engineers, war profiteers who understood that the true currency of the Gilded Age wasn't gold, it was silence. A group known internally as the Circle, though in private letters they called themselves Custodes Umbri, guardians of the shadow. Their rules were simple. Control perception, buy loyalty, eliminate dissidents. And Evangeline, she violated all three. She wasn't naive. She knew the risk. Every journal entry, every coded map, every visit to the workers' districts was a countdown. She saw the pattern of explosions, the labor leaders who vanished, the engineers who died in boiler accidents after refusing to sell their patents. She saw the ledger books hidden in Cornelius's study marked not with dollars but initials. Initials of people who would die so steel could rise. And what did she do? She didn't run. She documented it all. She chose to be the last witness, but witnesses disappear in empires built on secrecy. That's why the case was closed in 6 days. Not due to lack of evidence, but because the evidence was too powerful. Because somewhere, in that ice house sealed overnight with fresh mortar, was the body not of a woman, but of a revolution that almost happened. Think about that. A single woman came within hours of unraveling an entire American oligarchy, and she didn't die screaming. She died silent, Because silence is the most profitable sound in the world. This isn't ancient history. This is the prototype, the mold. This is how power survives. The circle didn't die in 1887. It grew roots. It shifted names. It moved into boardrooms, intelligence agencies, pharmaceutical boards, tech summits. But the rules haven't changed. Control. Perception. Buy loyalty. Eliminate dissidence. And that's why I'm telling you this. Not to scare you, to prepare you. Because every man who hears this story faces a choice. Wake up. Or stay asleep. But once you wake up, the world looks different. You start to notice what others don't. You start to see the seams in the simulation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I'll ask you now, quietly, to prepare for what comes next. Because we're not just talking about a missing wife anymore. We're talking about an entire class of erased people, each one a threat to the system. Each one swallowed by history's convenient amnesia. This isn't folklore. This isn't urban legend. This is how empires bury their sins. And now, for the first time in over a century, we're digging them up. There is no police file. There's no autopsy. There's no death certificate. But there's a locked drawer in the Carnegie Museum of Natural History beneath a mislabeled collection of trilobites containing Evangeline's final letter, one that was never meant to surface. Dated December 14th, 1887. Sealed in wax with a symbol the modern world has conveniently forgotten. A downward-pointing triangle with a line through it. The alchemical sigil for silence broken. The letter wasn't addressed to Cornelius. It wasn't to family. It was written to the one who finds this. That means you. In trembling script, she wrote, I am watched. Even in mirrors I see strangers who look like me. My husband believes I am weak, hysterical. That's what they all think. They do not understand the fire I've kept beneath my ribs. I've heard them in the cellar, speaking in tongues no school teaches. Names they mention, Wexler, Rourke, Ashcroft, Vanderhorn, men I've never met but feel watching me in dreams. They speak of contingency rituals should I become inconvenient. I am inconvenient. Tonight, I will leave the locket in the hollow stair spindle. If you have found it, they have failed. If you are reading this, make noise, ruin them with it. But there was no noise, because the locket never surfaced until 1972. That's when a young janitor named Eli Sanborn, cleaning out the decaying Vandemark estate before its demolition, tripped over a loose plank. Inside, a hidden stair spindle. Inside that, a velvet pouch containing a bronze locket, green with time, etched with the same downward-pointing triangle. He was found dead 3 days later. Natural causes. Age, 27. His journals, sold anonymously to a private collector in 1984. Revealed something astonishing. The locket wasn't ornamental. It was a miniature projector, built from materials not available in 1887. Tantalum wiring, beryllium shielding, a crystal filament. Technology that didn't officially exist until the 1950s. Let that sink in. Woman in the 1800s left behind tech from the mid-20th century buried in a secret compartment activated only by heat from human skin and a specific pressure code tapped in Morse. What it projected. 4 images burned in circular glass slides. A photograph of a steel mill, but not any known one. It bore the emblem of an octopus with human eyes. A coded ledger with 13 names, including Carnegie, Morgan, and 2 that remain redacted. A map of Pittsburgh overlaid with hexagonal sectors and labeled Zones of Influence -1884. A blood-stained handprint, not Evangeline's, too large, male, and missing the index finger. And in the corner of each slide was stamped one word. Awake. This is where things slide from bizarre into forbiddance. Because suddenly Evangeline isn't just a missing woman. She's a time fracture, a glitch. A rogue variable in the system that wasn't supposed to exist. And this is why the circle erased her. Not just because she knew, but because she didn't belong in their version of the timeline. Let me ask you something. Why do so many secrets in history involve people appearing too early, knowing too much, dying too young, or disappearing entirely? Why do elite families trace their bloodlines like spells? Why do certain names repeat over centuries, never dying, only transferring power behind new curtains? Because control isn't just about money, or war, or politics. It's about narrative. And Evangeline, she broke narrative. Her very existence challenged the script written for that century. A woman who wasn't afraid, who understood technology, who moved between class lines, who asked the right questions and kept asking after she was told to. Stop. What happened to her locket after 1972? It vanished. Like her, some say it's locked in a vault beneath Langley. Others say it was broken down, and its core became part of a deep, black quantum memory project Cody named Echo Voice. But the message she left behind? That survived. So now I ask you, if a woman from 1887 saw through the veil, what's your excuse? You live in a world of data, satellites, deepfakes, and noise. But can you hear the signal? Can you still feel the tremor in your bones when truth walks into the room uninvited? Because we're not done. Evangeline's trail didn't end in that mansion. There's evidence she left Pittsburgh alive, that she ran, but not alone, and the men who helped her? They paid in blood. They were not in any official registry. No census, no military files, no business licenses. But they moved through America's Gilded Age, like silent engineers of fate. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Black Gears, not a club, not a cult. A machine, human components assembled for a single purpose, to protect what was never meant to exist. Their sigil was simple, a black gear with a keyhole in the center. Their motto, stitched into the lining of coats and carved into the handles of strange brass tools: we repair the clock, not the time. Who were they? Clockmakers, train engineers, disgraced inventors, anarchist professors, men excommunicated from polite society for asking questions no one wanted answered until they met her. Evangeline in a forgotten transcript from a burned telegram station near Scranton, Pennsylvania, reconstructed from surviving ashes in 1996. A partial message reads, "She knows how to bypass the waveform locks. The girl is not mad. She remembers things she couldn't have lived. Protect her." The gears turn red. M.F., believed to be Magnus Fiedler, expelled MIT physicist, vanished 1887. Witness accounts dismissed as folklore describe sightings of Evangeline in the weeks after her disappearance. December 29, 1887. A woman matching her description boards a freight train near Johnstown, not alone. Accompanied by a man with a mechanical hand and a boy who speaks in code. January 3, 1888. A blacksmith in Chillicothe claims to repair a brass cart with wheels that hummed like beehives. A veiled woman pays him in silver coins with no date. January 18, 88. A hotel in St. Louis reports an entire top floor rented under the name V. Ashcroft. The guests leave no luggage, only blueprints. The manager disappears 2 days later. What were they building? No one knows for certain. But fragments remain. A rotating compass with no magnetic components, pointing always to a mountain in Colorado. A mechanical diary that erases itself at sunrise unless wound counterclockwise at midnight. A child's drawing retrieved from a fireproof chest depicting a woman with wings made of wires standing inside a hexagonal gate labeled "Not Yet." Then came the silencing. One by one, the Brotherhood vanished. Samuel Bragg, a machinist from Ohio, reportedly fell into his own gear press. No remains recovered. Dr. Heinrich Lutz, a surgeon in Baltimore, found dead in an alley, his tongue removed, his watch stuffed in his mouth. Watch hands spinning counterclockwise. Captain Jericho Vale, river pilot and suspected Brotherhood smuggler, went down with his ship. The wreck was later found. On dry land. It wasn't just murder. It was ritualized erasure. Who hunted them? The same force that erased Evangeline. The Circle of 12, a private assembly of industrialists, bishops, and lawmakers who believed history was theirs to compose. But Evangeline left them a message, etched beneath a false panel in an old Brotherhood. Safe house in Kansas. If we vanish, it is not death. It is delay. The gears will turn again when the liar becomes king and the sky cracks open. Wait for the dreamer who cannot die. That phrase appeared again in 1991, spray-painted on a subway wall in Brooklyn. In the same handwriting. They should have won. They had everything: money, power, governments, myth, but they didn't account for leakage. Some truths can't be buried forever. And as for the Brotherhood, they may be gone, but they left a blueprint. And we found it. They thought they'd destroyed it. The final holdout of the Brotherhood station, Ashcroft, was incinerated in 1888 by federal agents, acting under an emergency directive from a committee that did not officially exist. The fire was blamed on faulty gas lines, but what they burned was a decoy, because beneath the charred rubble, 2 floors underground, encased in a vault of obsidian black steel and lined with lead, the chamber survived. Its entrance? A false furnace door. Its lock? A cylindrical gear core requiring a specific key, one that had not been seen in over a century, until 2009. A construction crew renovating a condemned railway bridge in Montana unearthed a strange item embedded inside. A petrified tree root, a small brass object shaped like a key but cold to the touch. Engraved on its shaft, AVA, and below that, the same sigil, a black gear with a keyhole. They handed it off to state authorities. It disappeared within 48 hours, except a single photograph remained. It surfaced on a fringe message board dedicated to lost technologies. The thread was deleted in under 10 minutes, but archived by one user under the alias 13EchoHeart. That user hasn't posted since. But here's where the pattern fractures. The key was not inert. Those who touched it reported symptoms: uncontrollable lucid dreams involving unfamiliar machines, visions of a woman in black, face obscured, holding a glowing map of Pittsburgh, a persistent whisper in a forgotten dialect, repeating the phrase, "The sequence awaits. Rebuild the axis, the spindle is not broken." We believe the key was used just once. Satellite data confirms that in early 2011, seismic anomalies occurred near Greystone Hollow, a defunct mining town in Colorado with no current residents. For 11 minutes, a low-frequency hum pulsed beneath the ground consistent with the operation of massive, gear-based machinery. Then silence. Nothing has moved since, but a single file, leaked from a whistleblower at a military tech lab in Nevada. In 2015, reveals more. A classified diagram labeled Ashcroft Chamber, Internal Layout, Hypothesis. It showed 6 distinct sections. The access room, a rotating brass floor, lined with copper etchings in the shape of constellations. The cradle, an elevated seat, with restraints facing a projection wall of unknown material. The spiral choir, a cylindrical tunnel where sound behaves non-linearly, recordings age in reverse. The iron nursery, a room filled with humanoid shapes made of gears and glass eyes. The memory loop, a vault containing 12 cylinders labeled with surnames from the 1887 ledger. The final passage, a sealed hallway, with a sign above reading, "To be opened only when the dreamer returns." Who is the dreamer? We don't know, but Evangeline mentioned a child. In her letter. He speaks in fragments in code, in a tongue no one taught him. But he knows my dreams before I speak them. They call him impossible. I call him son. There is no birth record, no proof of his existence, but in 2022, A boy in rural Idaho, age 9, was reported missing for 17 minutes while hiking with his family. When he was found, he had no memory of where he went. Only one thing was off. He spoke perfect Morse code for 48 hours, and all he said was, "Ava left the gate open." The gears will turn again. The key has been turned once. Once more, and the door opens. We are standing on the edge. Evangeline did not die. She ran. She hid the boy. She scattered the Brotherhood's fragments. And she left the Ashcroft key too. Be found when the timeline reached its second fracture. This is that time dot, and we haven't even told you what's behind that final door. Beneath the Ashcroft chamber, deeper than any blueprint acknowledged, there exists a seventh room never labeled, never mentioned in any recovered document, except one. A torn journal entry written in iron gall ink, dated October 14th, 1887, signed by Evangeline V. Ashcroft herself. It is done. 13 chosen, all willing, none innocent. Their lives removed from time, their deaths postponed indefinitely. If this fails, may no one ever find the ledger. The Brotherhood called it the Immortality Ledger. But it wasn't about living forever. It was about removal from history, from decay, from consequence. A selective erasure of biological entropy using temporal insulation, and it named 13 individuals. We don't know all of them, but from surviving fragments, 4 names stand out. 1. Leopold Reinhardt, Pittsburgh banker, coal magnate, and known eugenicist. Officially died in 1886 from tuberculosis. Yet his signature appears on an oil deed. Dated 1899.2. Marguerite Fallon, French medium and mathematician, claimed to channel future equations. A photo of her surfaced in a 1943 OSS file, UNAG ED.3. Elias Hobb, railroad foreman turned whistleblower. Described passengerless. Trains that carried only locked crates and Brotherhood sigils. Declared legally dead in 1890. His fingerprints matched those of a man arrested in Chicago. 1968. Speaking only in reversed Latin. 4. Dr. Harold Bentham, surgeon in Brotherhood. Anatomist. Obsessed with reversing brain death. A photograph dated 2017, taken at a private neurology conference in Zurich, shows a man with his face unmistakable. These individuals were not merely preserved, they were repurposed. Each was said to house a fragment of something ancient, the prime thread, according to Evangeline's notes. An unbreakable sequence woven into their physiology. Not DNA, something older. A recent independent study of leaked Ashcroft documents mentions a ritual called thread tuning, a process by which a living human could be calibrated to a fixed point in time, allowing the body to persist while the universe revolved around it. But there's a cost. Each threaded subject required a mirror, a sacrificial twin, often a child, bound to the subject's entropy. When the child withers, the host remains. And when the host dies, the child is erased from every record that ever existed. Entire bloodlines gone. Entire towns empty. Somewhere in Kansas, there's a graveyard of headstones with no names. Just numbers. And every number corresponds to a mirror subject in the immortality ledger. But here's where it turns. One name was crossed out in red. #13. E.V. Ashcroft. She was never meant to survive. She was the control variable. The fail-safe. If the experiment spiraled, her body would host the termination key. She wrote, "They think I'm the lock. I am not. I am the fuse. When the 13th heartbeat stops, the door does not open, it detonates." So why was her body never found? Why, in 2023, did a sealed package arrive at a private mailbox in New Mexico containing a blood sample with genetic markers from all 12 ledger subjects, plus one anomaly? The DNA matched a girl born in 2014. She dreams of machines. She speaks in blueprints. She hums in harmonic frequencies near iron, and she draws gears with black centers. Evangeline may not have died. She may have recycled, and that means the countdown has started again. Because if Evangeline's bloodline lives, then the termination, he still exists, and someone somewhere is trying to turn it. By now you're wondering, how could all of this remain hidden for over a century? It didn't. It was managed. Shortly after the events of 1887, the same year Evangeline vanished and the Ashcroft chamber was buried, 12 men met in a windowless room beneath a Carnegie-owned library in New York. They weren't part of the Brotherhood. They were its accountants. Rail tycoons, bankers, historians, 2 clergy, 1 surgeon, 1 publisher, and 1 man only listed in records as the auditor. They called themselves the Circle of 12. Their purpose was not to uncover the truth, but to contain it. They created the protocol of silence, not a law, not a contract. A sequence, 12 directives, each tied to a person, a region, and a method of control, designed to suppress public knowledge of the Brotherhood, the ledger, the experiments, and Evangeline's child. The directives were misinformation seeding, disperse false versions of events through early radio plays, newspaper serials, and staged seance reports. Redacted archives, redirect independent researchers through false public records and altered census data. Memory vaulting, use electromagnetic therapies to erase key witness testimonies under the guise of psychiatric rehabilitation. Displacement of artifacts, funnel recovered items into Vatican storage, private Eastern European collections, or beneath the Smithsonian's restricted sublevels. Linguistic contamination, alter meanings of Brotherhood terms like axis, spindle, and dreamer to neuter their symbolic power. Controlled leak theory, allow occasional conspiracy theories to flourish just enough to appear absurd. Private acquisition, buy land, journals, and bloodlines associated with the ledger. Suppression of the 13th thread, seek out any Ashcroft descendant and classify as biological hazard. Digital obfuscation, in the modern era, deploy bots and firewalls to erase digital traces of Ashcroft or Caldwell-related anomalies. Seer termination clause, identify and silence any mediums whose visions align with chamber schematics or the gear sigil. Psychological programming, introduce recurring visual motifs in media, gears, keys, twins to desensitize the population. Self-destruction protocol, if the ledger is discovered in full, initiate Voltus, a complete data wipe of all 13 host identities and mirror subjects, including recursive DNA erasure programs. The protocol worked. For over a century, no one came close. But something changed in 2020. A low-level data analyst working for a digital genealogy company flagged an anomaly in mitochondrial lineage's 13 genetic patterns that had no origin point, all traced back to children born between 2009 and 2014. None of them related. None of them explainable. And all of them, every last one, dreamed of the same place, a black chamber beneath the ground, a rotating floor of brass, and a whisper. The mirror is breaking, the axis is waking. The countdown has begun. The Circle of 12 attempted to intervene, but only 5 of them are confirmed alive today. 1 died from apparent self-immolation. Another drowned in a dry swimming pool. 3 are simply gone. The protocol is failing. And Evangeline's blood moves again. Someone or something is unsealing the past. And if the ledger unlocks fully, the last barrier between us and the chamber's true purpose will fall. Because this was never about immortality. It was about resetting time itself. What if time doesn't just flow? What if it can be wound? The deepest secret of the Brotherhood wasn't their rituals. It wasn't the chamber, not even the ledger. It was a device. One they only referred to in whispers as the Axis machine, a biomechanical construct theorized by Ashcroft but completed somehow after his disappearance. It was designed to intersect temporal resonance points through synchronized biological anchors. In plain terms, it could rewind reality using the minds and bloodlines of those exposed to specific trauma frequencies, but it only worked under 3 conditions. The operator had to be genetically marked a direct carrier of what Ashcroft called the mirror gene. The chamber's rotating gear floor had to align during a lunar nadir, a moment that occurs once every 113 years. All 13 host identities, living echoes of Evangeline's child, had to be in emotional synchronization. This machine wasn't about travel. It wasn't a DeLorean or a wormhole. It was a reset lever. If activated, it would revert one fixed moment in world history, erasing all causal events after it, except for the memories held by the host operator. Ashcroft didn't build it to gain power. He built it to undo something. The Brotherhood believed Evangeline's pregnancy, what they called the Immaculate Error, was not human. That the child was not born of man and woman, but of wound and will. The result of their own psychic experiments gone too far. But Ashcroft loved her. And when she died, he cracked. He built the Axis machine to return to the moment before she stepped into the chamber, before the scream that split the floor, before the echoes started. But he never used it, because the child lived, and grew, and passed its echo on. We believe the last recorded use or partial activation of the Axis machine occurred in 1914, hours before the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The operator? Unknown. But records suggest one of the original 13 had escaped and attempted a fracture reset, and it didn't fully work. The result? A time fracture, a moment where 2 versions of history overlapped before collapsing back into one. Time resumed, but off by exactly 3.14 seconds. You don't notice that kind of shift. But biological systems do. After 1914, birth defects increased. Globally, so did sudden déjà vu reports, twin births, and split personality disorders. Some psychologists began documenting what they called phantom days, memories that didn't exist, emotions without origin, grief for someone never known. We believe the Axis machine fractured time, not fully rewound it. And every generation since has been drifting out of sync. The countdown referenced in the dreams of the 2009 to 2014 children. It ends in 2027, and the chamber has begun to hum again. The Brotherhood believed in reincarnation, but not the way you've been taught. Not souls reborn at random, not karma, not peace. They believed in echoes, fragments of a consciousness splintered across time, embedded not in a soul, but in blood, stored, activated, replicated. And what activated them? Pain, extreme, focused trauma, especially when experienced by a child before the age of 9. Ashcroft called it the Lazarus Relay, a term found scratched into the back of ledger page 47, beneath an anatomical sketch of a child's brain connected by copper wires to a pulsing obsidian orb. He theorized that when trauma occurred in one host, a living descendant or mirror of the original chamber child, the pain would awaken memory strands in the others, even across continents, even across generations. And it's happening again. Between 2010 and 2020, 13 children were born under statistically impossible conditions, all delivered within a 6-day solar anomaly window, all with heart rates exceeding 220 BPM during birth, all tested as blood type null and impossible, undocumented blood classification. And each of them, between ages 7 and 9, experienced a spontaneous neurological episode doctors labeled as non-focal waking seizures. But what those seizures really were: memory floods. They spoke in old dialects. Some drew the chamber's gear symbol without prompting. One boy in North Dakota etched the exact phrase that Evangeline had screamed in 1887. "He is not my son. He was never born." And here's where it gets worse. Of the original 13, 3 are already dead. each under impossible circumstances. One girl vanished during a fire, yet her twin remained untouched physically and emotionally. One boy drowned in a dry bathtub, his lungs filled with black fluid, not recognized by any toxicologist. And one was found in the middle of a highway in Russia, eyes open, mouth repeating the phrase, "The chamber remembers." The remaining 10 are being watched by private firms, by special educators, by a non-governmental body known only in documents as OBEX-13. They aren't protecting these children. They're preparing them. For what? We believe OBEX intends to complete the relay to synchronize the 10 surviving echoes and bring them to the Ashcroft chamber for a final activation. A complete global time reset. Why now? Because the gear floor turns again in 2027, on the 140th anniversary of Evangeline's scream. And if all 13 were ever reactivated at once, even partially, the Axis machine wouldn't fracture time. It would erase it. Everything that has happened since 1887, the wars, the nations, the memories, you would be gone. And only the one who activates the machine would remember anything. They always counted 13. 13 echoes. 13 vessels. 13 keys to unlock the Axis. But there's something no one in the Brotherhood predicted. The 13th host was never born. Not in the way we understand birth. Not through blood. Not through pain. Not through womb. She was made. Not in a lab. But in the exact spot where it all began. The Ashcroft estate. Now a condemned lot outside modern-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 1999, under cover of a natural gas pipeline dispute, OBEX contractors unearthed something in the foundations of the estate, a sealed sarcophagus, smooth, circular, obsidian black. No inscriptions. Inside, a small humanoid form, not fully organic, curled in a fetal position. Every record was erased within 72 hours. But one leak survived. A single X-ray plate showing an incomplete skeleton with a perfectly preserved brainstem, floating in an unknown fluid. OBEX named her Echo Null. She was not alive, but not dead either. Her brainstem reacted to external stimuli, music, electromagnetic pulses, and most disturbingly, spoken trauma. When a test subject read aloud Evangeline's final journal entry, Echo Null's eyes opened for 3.14 seconds, then closed again. After this, OBEX vanished Echo Null into their Arctic site in Svalbard. But here's the secret. She's not the 13th, she's the first, the original prototype. The missing piece of the relay. The chamber's intended child built, not born. And likely aborted mid-ritual in 1887 when Evangeline resisted. The other 12? Unstable echoes. Noise. She is the signal. All the trauma. All the screams. All the fractures in time. They weren't random. They were search beacons, seeking her. We now believe that OBEX intends to reactivate Echo Null in 2027 by fusing her consciousness with the remaining living echoes, creating a single, immortal entity capable of surviving a full Axis reset. They call it the awakening of the original daughter. But there's one final catch. She cannot be activated without Evangeline's bloodline, which brings us back to Pittsburgh, to a girl born in 1994, DN unremarkable, history forgotten. But with one anomaly, she vanished for exactly 9 minutes, as a child during a field trip in 2003 at a closed-down coal mine built over the outer edge of the Ashcroft estate. When she returned, she was covered in ash and humming a lullaby that no one had taught her. Her name? We'll call her Clara. She now works in a nondescript office. Has no idea who she is. No idea that her blood is the final key, but OBEX knows. And they're watching. Her co-workers think she's just quiet, a little odd. The kind who doesn't go to happy hour. The kind who doesn't make mistakes but doesn't take credit either. But Clara is not her real name. It was a sign. So was her apartment. So was her job. And every Tuesday at 4:44 p.m., she receives a plain white envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just a single phrase inside typed in courier font. Always 13 words long. No one else ever sees them. Not even building security. She burns each note after reading it. She doesn't know why, but her body remembers, because Clara isn't just Evangeline's descendant. She's the fail-safe. When Evangeline screamed and disrupted the Axis in 1887, the machine burned the original ritual out of time, but not before the Brotherhood encoded a backup protocol in Evangeline's mitochondrial DNA. That genetic key passed down through her female lineage lay dormant for 5 generations. Until Clara. She's the last uninterrupted carrier, but she was never supposed to be found. She was hidden by the resistance. Yes, there was a resistance. Not a loud one. Not public. Just 3 surviving members of a failed Brotherhood splinter cell called Anathema Blue. They knew that Obex would come searching. They knew the relay would try to reconnect. So they created a plan. The Clara Protocol. A synthetic psychological veil. Built from trauma. Delivered in early childhood, just enough to fracture memory, but not enough to destroy function. The veil works like insulation. It suppresses the activation key. In Clara's case, it was a near-death drowning at age 5. One that doctors wrote off as an accident. But Anathema Blue made sure it imprinted deeply enough to block signal alignment, and it worked. Until Obex interfered. In 2019, an unmarked drone delivered an atmospheric payload into Clara's apartment building. A burst of subsonic pulses at 111 Hz, an exact match to the resonance frequency of the Ashcroft Gear Room. 3 residents died of aneurysms. Clara had a dream that night. She stood in a field of black snow, holding a pocket watch, watching the sky turn red. When she woke, she had written these numbers into her bed sheets with a piece of broken mirror. 13947000. The Brotherhood believes it's a countdown. To the final phase. To the reawakening. To the complete overwrite of post-1887 memory. If Obex reaches Clara first, they will initiate what's known internally as Event Holoroot. A full integration of Clara's genetic key with Echo Null's preserved stem, and then every recorded human memory from 1887 to present day will become false, fabricated, inserted, forgettable. Reality would fracture. Time would correct itself, but without you. Because in the new timeline, you never existed. And only Clara would know. Unless there's a church just outside Pittsburgh. Old, rot-stained, shuttered for decades. Locals call it St. Mercy's Hollow, but it has no records, no diocese listing, no founding documents. As if it was always just there. Every attempt to demolish it fails. In 1983, workers from the Allegheny Zoning Committee tried to raise the foundation. 3 days later, all 5 men resigned. The lead contractor was found walking barefoot in the Monongahela River, whispering, "She's beneath, but she's looking up." Beneath St. Mercy's Hollow is the last known Anathema Blue stronghold. A hidden chamber sealed with cold iron and 12 hexagonal locks. The 13th lock is missing, inside. According to the recovered fragments of the Evangeline manuscript, lies the memory root, an artifact believed to house the unaltered record of pre-event history. The Brotherhood refers to it as the Null Codex. Not a book, not a device, but a living fragment of time embedded in obsidian glass, pulsing with fragmented whispers. If accessed by someone bearing Evangeline's bloodline, it could reconstruct the timeline before the Axis breach, prevent Event Holoroot, and most importantly, disable the relay. But the chamber reacts violently to synthetic blood. Anyone not of the Ashcroft line experiences temporal collapse, brain hemorrhaging, involuntary seizures, identity degradation. Only one can open it. Now Clara, she doesn't know it yet. But in her dreams, when she sees black snow and hears that lullaby, it's the Null Codex calling her, and Obex knows. On July 13, 2025, a classified satellite scan picked up seismic activity beneath St. Mercy's Hollow. Someone or something had opened 12 of the 13 locks. The final lock requires a heartbeat. One synced perfectly to Evangeline's original rhythm. An echo of the scream frequency that broke the machine in 1887. The scream frequency that broke the machine in 1887, when exposed to 111 Hz, matches it exactly. Now the countdown makes sense. 1394700 13 days, 9 hours 47 minutes. At 0, either the codex is accessed, or Clara is. Either truth is restored or rewritten permanently. And the final truth? Clara was never supposed to live this long. The original plan was to activate her in 2023. Someone delayed it. Someone inside Obex, which means there's still a traitor on the inside. His name is not in any file, not in any database, not even in the OBEX Index of Origin, a master record said to contain the name of every human born after the reset. But he exists. They call him Glasslight. Not a rank, not a code name, a designation, given only to those who have seen the relay with their own eyes and survived. And Glasslight looked into it twice. He was there in 1996 when the Munich extraction failed, when 3 entire city blocks collapsed into sinkholes with no seismic activity, when surveillance caught a blur man-shaped but distorted walking through crumbling buildings that never hit the ground. Obex labeled it a spectral fold. Glasslight labeled it proof. But he never filed the report. Instead, over the next 20 years, he embedded himself, climbed ranks, operated silent, neutralized threats, until he gained level 7 access, temporal entry clearance, and then he stopped obeying. In 2023, Glasslight rerouted a sequence drone away from Clara's apartment, the drone that was supposed to inject her with Neuronix 3, a memory accelerant designed to force early activation. He didn't destroy it. He sent it to Nevada. To the buried array, a facility that doesn't officially exist, a place where failed copies of Clara were raised, clones, attempts, fetal replicas grown from Ashcroft mitochondrial samples, each one rejected by the Codex, every single one. Except Clara. Glasslight found her through a memory fragment smuggled out of the 1996 Munich breach, an anomalous video file labeled M_origin_FCL-01.VHS. Footage shows a girl 5 years old standing alone in a flooded room, whispering, "I was the last before the glass turned to dust." There was no camera present at the time of the incident. OBEX classified it as a recursive hallucination. Glasslight disagreed. He embedded a memory delay protocol in Clara's neural stream, buried it deep beneath the trauma, beneath the veil. A single sentence. It would activate only if she entered the chamber beneath St. Mercy's Hollow. And now, with the 13th lock nearly breached, Glasslight is missing. His last known transmission, recovered from a black box buried in a pine forest outside Krakow, contained just 3 words. She remembers everything. Not will remember. Remembers, which means Clara's veil is crumbling. The scream frequency is rising. The relay is listening, and the Null Codex? It's waking up. There are no recordings of the first scream. Only aftermath. Shattered glass 10 miles out. Horses collapsing in fields. Infants in Allegheny crying in perfect unison. And somewhere deep beneath Pittsburgh, the relay turned just slightly toward her. She was only 9. Doctors said it was a seizure. Priests called it possession. OBEX called it activation threshold breach, ATBO1. But survivors, those rare few who didn't claw their own ears off, call it something else. The broken hour. It lasted 61 seconds. And in those 61 seconds, 5 researchers aged 17 years. A wristwatch sealed in vacuum reversed time for exactly 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Every reflective surface in the Obex Appalachia site turned pitch black. And a humming voice, female, fractured, ancient, spoke a single phrase through every speaker and shattered radio. We were never meant to be heard. The scream wasn't a cry. It was a frequency key, a living resonance that unlocked something older than thought, a code written in Clara's blood, designed not to destroy, but to reset. Obex scientists called it a flesh-encoded cascade sequence. But Evangeline's hidden texts were clearer. She is the clock. The moment she sings again, the gears will move. The relay will choose, but choose what? They don't know, because the scream is not just a sound. It's a signal, a bridge, a resynchronization of a broken timeline, pointing toward a version of Earth before the relay was embedded in its crust. And if she screams again, this time, within the null codex chamber, with the 13th lock dissolved, the codex open, and the pulse of 111 hertz vibrating through her bones, then the memory root will bloom, and what blooms cannot be unbloomed. There are 2 theories. The clean reset, Clara restores the timeline. The relay detaches, humanity forgets everything. All history past 1866 dissolves like breath on a mirror. The parallax collapse. Every possible version of history unfolds at once. Time folds in on itself. And only those aligned with the codex resonance survive the integration, but both require a final catalyst. Clara's scream, the second scream, and she's been hearing it in her head. For weeks, in dreams, in silence, in moments between thoughts. Waiting. And now, she's standing before the 13th lock. Heart rate, 111 BPM, the null codex, pulsing. The chamber, breathing. And in the distance, from the ruins of St. Mercy's Hollow, someone else is humming. They built the chamber around her, stone by stone, seal by seal, not to keep her in, but to keep us out. Evangeline was not her real name. It was a designation, EVG-113N, one of the earliest voiced subjects, part of the Ashcroft singularity. Trials of 1859. She was 17 when they discovered her resonance matched 2 points in time. Not 1, 2, 1859, and something from far beyond. A temporal echo labeled simply 12C. She could hear it, sing to it, and then eventually speak with it. The experiments began in an asylum outside Baltimore. The researchers didn't last, not mentally, not physically. One gouged his own tongue out and wrote on the walls in blood, "She is not singing back, she is being sung through." Evangeline was moved to a monastery in Pennsylvania. That monastery would later become St. Mercy's Hollow, and the voices never stopped. She described them as not voices at all, but feelings wrapped in shape. Emotions given teeth. Sometimes they whispered backwards through cracks in stone. Sometimes they stepped through. In 1867, 1 year after Timothy Caldwell vanished and the relay began pulsing underground, Evangeline was sealed into the monastery's lowest vault. Not by Obex, not by the church, but by an independent faction, a clandestine group of women called the Hollow Order. They were generational, matrilineal, always 12, each one chosen by bloodline and resonance. They believed Evangeline was the bridge, but also the bait, a tether for something that wanted in. They lined the walls of her chamber with salt, scripture, and surgical-grade mirrors. The mirrors were polished daily, never to reflect her directly. And for 134 years, she remained silent. Until 2001. Until Clara came, a girl with no past, no records, brought by a woman with false papers and real fear in her eyes. Clara was placed into Evangeline's former room. Not the chamber, but the room directly above it. On the third night, Clara began to hum in her sleep. A tune no one had taught her. A pattern lost since 1867. A mirror melody, one that reached the sealed stone below. And Evangeline hummed back. The nuns recorded it, sent the cassette to Obex. 3 days later, the monastery burned. But the cassette survived, buried beneath rubble, recovered by glasslight, and played in secret at the buried array. Inside the tape, beyond the audio spectrum, was a third voice. A voice that didn't match Clara, didn't match Evangeline, didn't match any human frequency. Just 7 whispered words. The codex is not a book. It's a womb. Evangeline died the day the monastery fell. Her body was never found, but her presence remains. In the codex chamber, the walls pulse faintly, and when Clara steps closer, she sees it, a silhouette in the mirror, not her own reflection, but a woman behind the glass, pressing her palms outward and mouthing a single word Clara hasn't heard since she was 5. Daughter. Evangeline didn't die. She crossed over, into the glass, into the codex. And now, she wants out. At precisely 3:33 a.m., the null codex unlocks itself. No hands, no keys. Just a low, grinding soundstone shifting against time. Clara doesn't flinch. She's not a child anymore. The pain, the visions, the voices, they've tempered her. And now as the codex yawns open, she sees not pages, but a chamber of shifting geometry, a living mechanism. Inside, 12 metallic rods orbit a black sphere. Each rod engraved with languages that shouldn't coexist. Sanskrit, binary, Enochian, Morse, even her own childhood handwriting. This is the relay's heart. And it's been waiting for her breath, not her blood, not her DNA, not even her scream, her remembrance. The scientists were wrong. The OBEX manuals, the hollow order prophecies, even Evangeline's fevered hymns, all of them missed one simple truth. The relay doesn't want to be unlocked. It wants to be understood, and the cost of understanding is everything you've forgotten. The price of remembering? Sanity. As Clara steps into the codex's event field, memories not her own cascade into her skull, a temple built before the oceans, a race of tall beings who bred thought like currency. The first false history encoded in starlight and scripture. The erasure of the real moon. The true origin of the gods, not divine, but exiled. And beneath it all, Pittsburgh, again and again, burning in every timeline, a city of convergence. A scar on the map where timelines fold inward, where the relay was buried, not by humans, but by survivors of the last collapse. Clara sees herself, dozens of selves, in plague masks, in leather armor, in futuristic suits laced with prayer wire. All of them dying the moment they touch the codex, all of them screaming. But this time, she doesn't scream. She remembers. The black sphere opens like an eye, no pupil, no iris, just depth. And in its depths, a message unfolds like origami soaked in blood. There is no chosen one. There's only the one who chooses to remember. And Clara chooses. The relay pulses. Reality hiccups. Everything changes. Across the city, lights flicker. Clocks stutter. People wake with memories they never lived. Dead relatives alive again. Mansions gone. Forests grown where there were streets. A sky that now has 3 moons. And in the Obex Appalachia site, every locked door swings open. The relay is no longer dormant. It has engaged. Now comes the final question. What will it do with a world that dares to remember? There is no epilogue. Only evidence, 17 seconds of raw footage. Captured on a corrupted DV tape, pulled from the ruins of Obex Appalachia site, 2001. Classified, suppressed, forgotten. Until now. The camera is handheld, shaky, breathing audible. The timestamp flickers, August 11th, 2001, 3:40 a.m. The footage begins in a dark hallway. The lights overhead surge violently, then die. Emergency backup kicks in red, throbbing like a heartbeat. Clara appears in frame, barefoot, covered in ash. She's humming the same melody Evangeline sang in the vault. But now it's layered, harmonized, two voices through one mouth. Behind her, the null codex, split open, hovering above the floor. Its pages no longer paper, but liquid mirror. She turns to face the camera, not smiling, not weeping. Awake, she whispers something, barely audible beneath the electrical static. For 2 decades, forensic audio teams tried to isolate the phrase. In 2023, an AI model trained on ancient dead languages finally offered a translation, 7 words. They were never coming from the stars. The last 3 seconds of footage show the mirror folding in on itself, turning inside out. A sphere of light erupts behind Clara, blinding, but silent. Then static, then black. No body was ever found. No survivors identified. Obex claimed it was a methane explosion. The media swallowed the lie. But satellite data showed no atmospheric disturbance, just a sudden vacuum. As if something had been removed. As if something had left. Aftermath. Pittsburgh changed. Not overnight, but in whispers. Maps shifted. Families recalled children that never existed. Architectural anomalies appeared where streets used to be. And the moon on certain nights appeared wrong. Closer, warmer, almost watching. Obex disbanded in 2003. Its assets were absorbed by Glasslight Initiative and then erased. But the Null Codex? It was never about the book. It was a doorway, a signal, a mirror held to our oldest lie. And somewhere in whatever is left of Clara's mind, in that dimension folded just behind ours, she waits. Not as a girl, not as a prophet, but as a mirror. For those who dare to look and remember. End of file. The Caldwell Phenomena, 1867. History isn't written by the victors. It's hidden by the survivors.